5, 4, 3, 2, 1, ignition, and liftoff.
AST SpaceMobile is on a mission to make cellular coverage and connectivity more accessible and affordable around planet Earth. They intend to construct a space-based cellular broadband network with global coverage that can be used with a wide range of devices that have connectivity capabilities from 2G to 5G. By going over these plans, we'll see the technology at work and the telecommunications partnerships being made, as well as the technical obstacles, logistical hurdles, and regulatory pressures that are being addressed. So check that your connection is stable and tune into this latest video by Ascencore. In the words of AST, SpaceMobile service is being designed to provide cost-effective, high-speed cellular broadband services to end users who are out of terrestrial cellular coverage using existing mobile devices. This is to be achieved by a constellation of high-powered, large phased array satellites in LEO, low Earth orbit. The radio frequency spectrum being used is the low and middle band spectrum, which is controlled by MNOs. MNOs in this context refers to mobile network operators. Think companies that provide cellular services. SpaceMobile's intention is to create complementary relationships with MNOs to offer the SpaceMobile service to the end-user customers of MNOs. This is done so customers who already pay for cellular services with their MNO don't need to directly subscribe to SpaceMobile services and won't need to buy any new hardware. Instead, users will be able to access the SpaceMobile service when prompted on their mobile device that they are no longer within range of the land-based facilities of the MNO operator and will be able to purchase a plan directly with their existing mobile provider. AST elaborates by explaining this will work on a revenue-sharing business model for SpaceMobile service in their agreements with MNOs. The company goes on further with their reasoning that MNOs will find their proposition attractive because MNOs would be able to augment and extend their coverage without building towers or other land-based infrastructure that might be difficult to construct due, for example, to challenging geography. Even better, this would be possible without having to make significant investments, such as purchasing more frequencies on the radio wave spectrum. From these arrangements, MNOs are also purported to increase subscribers' average revenue per user. The focus will be selling SpaceMobile service on a wholesale basis to MNOs, who then offer this capability directly to their customer base. In doing so, competition with existing MNOs can be avoided, whilst also greatly simplifying and reducing overhead, marketing costs, customer acquisition costs, billing infrastructure, and other customer support operations. Relationships also extend to wireless infrastructure providers to reach agreements that provide the in-country ground infrastructure and telecom facilities necessary for MNO partners to deliver the SpaceMobile service to their customers. The first major milestone to develop SpaceMobile occurred on April 1, 2019, with the launch of the first test satellite, Blue Walker 1, BW1, which was used to validate satellite-to-cellular architecture and was capable of managing communications delays from low Earth orbit and the effects of Doppler in a satellite-to-ground cellular environment using the 4G LTE protocol. In simple terms, connectivity between cellular service from a satellite to an ordinary mobile phone became successful proof of concept. After that, subsequent tests were done with the Blue Walker 3 BW3 test satellite in the early 2020s, which involved the deployment of the communication phased array antenna. Some early test result highlights include successful two-way voice calls and 4G download speeds of above 10 megabits per second directly to standard unmodified smartphones. On September 19, 2023, further progress was achieved with repeated successful two-way voice calls directly to standard unmodified smartphones using 5G connectivity and successful download speeds of approximately 14 megabits per second, utilizing 5 megahertz of low-band spectrum via the BW3 test satellite. AST states the first generation of commercial BB satellites, Block 1 BB satellites, have a similar size and weight to the BW3 test satellite. It has the company's own designed array solar panels and battery systems and will have 10 times higher throughput than the BW3 test satellite. Whereas Block 2 BB satellites, the second generation of commercial satellites, are expected to be approximately 2,400 square feet in size, almost 3.5 times bigger than the Block 1 BB satellite. They are designed to use a larger aperture array in order to provide greater spectrum reuse, enhanced signal strength, and increased capacity. Then the company's own AST 5000 application-specific integrated circuit ASIC chip has been reported to enable materially greater throughput capacity of up to 40 MHz per beam to support up to 120 megabit per second peak data rates, as well as up to 10,000 MHz of processing bandwidth per Block 2 BB satellite, which require less power and offer a lower overall unit cost. In other words, the second generation of commercial satellites are going to be more efficient and cost-effective due to underlying technology that grants stronger, wider, and more stable connectivity. Moreover, development is already underway for Block 2 satellites. For the ASIC chip, they have stated they have, quote, entered into an agreement with a leading semiconductor manufacturer for tape-out and fabrication. However, SpaceMobile designed and owns the IP of their ASIC chip, which helps reduce manufacturing and supply chain constraints. A launch service provider will be used to launch the first Block 2 BB satellite scheduled from between December 15, 2024 to March 31, 2025. This brings up the topic of scheduling and the launch process, which SpaceMobile says is contingent on a number of factors, such as satisfactory and timely completion of the design, assembly, and testing of payloads, in this case, the Block 2 BB satellite. In addition to regulatory approvals, availability of launch windows by launch providers, and logistics, AST needs to take into account other factors, most of which are beyond the company's control, such as weather. That's why working with multiple launch vehicle providers will be imperative both in the United States and abroad in order to secure launch contracts that would meet target launch costs and planned launch timelines. To expand launch options even more, satellites are designed to be launched in a variety of launch vehicles, alongside technical assessments to optimize for the maximum number of satellites that can fit into each launch vehicle. Additionally, AST notes there is the potential that continuous coverage is not expected to be available at all times in certain areas due to numerous factors, including the number of active satellites in the region, latitude coverage range, and other factors. SpaceMobile has specified their service is aimed at mobile subscribers who are constantly moving in and out of coverage or that are living or working outside coverage, have no cellular broadband coverage, and have no connectivity or mobile cellular coverage. They assert this is a large addressable market and point to supporting findings, such as from the Groupe Spatiale Mobile Association, GSMA, which reports approximately 5.6 billion mobile subscribers are constantly moving in and out of coverage. Approximately 3.4 billion people have no cellular broadband coverage, and approximately 400 million people have no connectivity or mobile cellular coverage. To meet this market demand, AST explains it is well positioned to deliver cellular broadband coverage at a competitive cost, since they believe MNOs and wireless infrastructure providers will integrate SpaceMobile cellular broadband coverage capabilities to more cost-effectively deliver wireless services in hard-to-reach areas and places that experience coverage gaps as compared to existing technology. Additionally, SpaceMobile service could be used as a backup in the event of a disruption of service to MNO's terrestrial infrastructure due to a natural disaster such as a hurricane, civil unrest, or a cyber attack. After all, redundancy is important for emergency communication during times of crisis, as well as adding an extra backup layer for even stabler connectivity in times of relative calm. Another competitive advantage comes from the ability for connectivity between satellites and a wide range of devices. As they state, the large phased array on their satellites allows for cellular broadband to be directly delivered to unmodified devices, enabling the direct-to-cell ecosystem with voice, text, data, and video services directly to any off-the-shelf and unmodified 2G, 4G LTE, or 5G mobile device using low and middle band cellular spectrum currently used by MNOs. Again, meaning there is no need to purchase expensive specialized equipment, new mobile devices, or to carry antennas, while at the same time reducing the number of satellites required to achieve service coverage as compared to smaller aperture satellites. SpaceMobile also tries to hold cost advantages by maintaining greater control of their manufacturing through extensive investments in manufacturing processes and their supply chain, as well as investment into equipment testing facilities such as for vibration and environment testing, all in an effort to have a greater degree of control to manufacture satellites according to schedule and at a lower cost. The company states they own the IP and control the manufacturing process, either internally or through third-party contract manufacturers, for approximately 95% of all the subsystems that will be used in the Block 2 BB satellites. Furthermore, having these intellectual property rights alongside ongoing efforts for more vertical integration in the supply chain for the production of subsystems significantly reduces dependency on individual suppliers, as well as better securing their supply chain and contributing to lowering the overall cost of satellites. They are also progressing towards industrializing component manufacturing and satellite assembly processes to automate the assembly, installation, and testing of satellites. That being said, they still acknowledge they contract manufacturers and vendors to manufacture specific components, subsystems, and software, particularly ones where they have invested or co-invested in the design and development of satellite components and subsystems, but do not own the IP design, which leads to manufacturing and distribution limitations for a certain number of years. In some cases, contracting is done through sole source suppliers. As a result, the supply chain still has a small disadvantage, which spurs on those ongoing efforts to exert greater control on every aspect of satellite development and production. One early example demonstrating the negative consequences of contracting was the delay of 5 Block 1 BB satellites in the advanced stages of assembling and testing, a setback that was in part attributed to, quote, the failure by suppliers of 2 key subsystems to meet their contractual delivery timelines. In response, AST endeavored to mitigate such risks in the future by reducing dependency on those suppliers. They also reached an agreement with the supplier of one of the subsystems and obtained a non-exclusive and worldwide license of the design and manufacturing rights of this subsystem for use in their Block 2 BB satellites. They also replaced the supplier of the other subsystem with a new supplier that jointly completed a new design with AST on the IP of this subsystem. While this episode exemplified the drawbacks of the small 5% of IP not owned, it also demonstrated the company's ability to adapt and overcome setbacks. It also shows how an issue with the first generation of satellites contributed to the betterment of the second generation of satellites. Now, in terms of the geography of operations, SpaceMobile has specifically stated they focus on United States manufacturing and intellectual property development activities, leading to satellite manufacturing, assembly, integration, and testing primarily taking place in U.S. facilities. Headquarters are in Texas, where they operate 185,000 square feet of satellite assembly, integrating and testing, AIT facilities in addition to other AIT engineering and development locations elsewhere in the United States, India, Scotland, Spain, and Israel. Satellites are also reported to be able to support both commercial and government applications on the same satellite or on a singular infrastructure, opening up opportunities to better optimize and monetize the capacity and capabilities of satellites, resulting in SpaceMobile entering into an agreement with a, quote, prime contractor for the U.S. government to perform certain tasks. That involved the BW3 test satellite that is already in orbit and the planned next 5 Block 1 BB satellites. Although more details on government agreements are scarce, the intention is to seek similar agreements in the future. What has been implied is the potential of the large phased array antenna that could be used in, quote, certain mission-critical communication capabilities in the government sector. In contrast, relationships with companies such as Vodafone, Rakuten, AT&T, Google, and American Tower have been publicly acknowledged. An initial part of AST's strategy is a modular deployment schedule. Satellites are constructed and launched in phases in order to first focus on initial coverage of a satellite constellation targeted at, quote, geographical areas that provide the most attractive opportunities. This kind of prioritization is meant to lower the cost of starting commercial services and generate revenue earlier. It also concentrates resources on fewer regulatory and ground infrastructure initiatives, which is preferred since such initiatives can potentially be time and resource intensive. That is because regulatory approvals are required in each jurisdiction where service is provided, and definitive agreements with MNOs need to be reached in order to offer service in each jurisdiction. A prime example of regulation is the International Telecommunication Union, ITU, a specialized agency of the United Nations. It regulates how satellites must be operated. This involves things such as the coordination of the operation of satellite systems in certain circumstances, and more generally are intended to avoid harmful interference among different users of the radio frequency spectrum. Regulation of this spectrum is necessary because there are only so many frequencies and certain hardware operates within a certain frequency range. So there needs to be order and priority for access to using radio wave frequencies as a means of communication both in space and on Earth. Then, although radio frequency spectrum regulations on Earth differ from region to region, it is generally a highly regulated environment for services using the radio frequency spectrum. For instance, in the U.S., commercial use of radio frequency spectrum is subject to the jurisdiction of the Federal Communications Commission, FCC, under the Communications Act. Most pertinent for this discussion is its responsibility for authorizing the operation of commercial spacecraft, and also authorizes non-U.S. licensed spacecraft to be used to serve the United States. It also licenses the operation of satellite Earth stations. What all this means for SpaceMobile service in the United States is highlighted in AST's pending amendment to petition for declaratory ruling and accompanying application, amendment application, that is before the FCC. It requests authority to launch and permit the commercial operation of a United States non-geostationary orbit NGSO satellite system, employing V-band frequencies. Moreover, it requests authority to utilize 248 satellites operating in 17 orbital planes, of which 243 satellites will operate at an approximate 730 to 740 kilometers, and the remaining 5 satellites will operate from a lower altitude of approximately 515 to 525 kilometers. If approved, the FCC is expected to apply routine conditions to a license grant authorizing launch and operation milestones for the NGSO satellite system that SpaceMobile must comply with. Any changes to the operational parameters of their satellites will require the filing of a new supplemental application to modify and approve the license with the FCC before satellite specifications can be modified. SpaceMobile service also needs the approval of the FCC's Wireless Telecommunications Bureau, which handles terrestrial wireless licensing, because their satellites connect with users' devices in the radio frequency spectrum traditionally used by MNOs. The logistics of which initially revolve around agreements like the lease agreement with AT&T to provide complementary application and supplemental coverage from space, SCS. It is anticipated that the FCC will process this application after addressing the pending amendment application regarding satellites. On the topic of FCC regulations, AST has experimental licenses with the FCC that permit the testing of the BW3 test satellite in LTE frequencies in multiple locations in the United States and permits the testing of V-band ground stations in Texas and Hawaii. In regards to the future for the ground segment of the SpaceMobile service, consisting of approximately 4 fixed Earth stations located in the United States, the FCC generally grants Earth station licenses for 15-year terms, and typically are renewed. Remember, all these procedures with the FCC are only for the jurisdiction of the U.S. Now compound that when similar regulatory approval is sought elsewhere. SpaceMobile reports they have, quote, entered into over 45 preliminary agreements and understandings with MNOs. Many of these preliminary agreements and understandings will need to be renewed as their terms will end before they expect to launch the SpaceMobile service. They will also need to execute definitive commercial agreements with MNOs that will supersede these preliminary agreements and understandings before they can offer their SpaceMobile service. An example of these kinds of agreements are the Vodafone commercial agreements that make up a partnership with Vodafone that is anticipated to use the SpaceMobile service. Some key points are mutual exclusivity, conditioned upon Vodafone making the SpaceMobile service available to all of its customers, and certain promotional efforts within all specified Vodafone markets for 5 years commencing on the launch of a commercial service in all of the specified Vodafone markets, as well as preferential commercial terms in Vodafone partner markets, 50-50 revenue share for the SpaceMobile service in Vodafone exclusivity markets, and the procurement, building, and operating of mobile network ground stations at a mutually agreed cost by Vodafone. This is in line with SpaceMobile's general statement that the expectation is that the MNOs will market and sell the enhanced coverage of the SpaceMobile service directly to their customers and offer the service at a differentiated price to the current terrestrial coverage. Service offering would primarily be through the following service offerings that are described as Day Pass, which is classified as ad hoc, where upon leaving the terrestrial cellular coverage area, mobile subscribers will receive a text on their phone asking if they would like to turn on the SpaceMobile service. Next, the monthly add-on subscription, which is classified as consumer, where subscribers can pay a fixed monthly fee to add the SpaceMobile service as a supplemental service to their current wireless plan. Roaming onto the SpaceMobile services network upon entering an area without cell tower coverage. Then monthly add-on subscription in the enterprise version. That is the same as monthly add-on for consumers, but with more data targeting commercial enterprises. Whereas the standalone Get Connected plan is for areas currently without cellular coverage, where subscribers will use and pay for the SpaceMobile service as their primary network through an MNO partner. Aeronautical and maritime offerings are meant to connect end users traveling in aircraft and vessels for cellular broadband service, while military and government operations have their own offerings. SpaceMobile service is anticipated to receive the majority of its revenue from those kinds of offerings just described, mainly through revenue-sharing arrangements with MNOs, though the company mentions the ultimate offerings and pricing will be subject to mutual agreement with the MNOs, and there can be no assurance as to what model any MNO ultimately offers its customers and the level of customer acceptance of these models. Such language isn't too surprising given that SpaceMobile is literally among the first to offer commercial cellular services from space at scale. Yet it does point to profitability from suitable revenue-sharing agreements being just as important as their core satellite technology in order to take their business to the next level. Then to a lesser extent, revenue is also projected to come from the resale of gateway equipment for ground stations, installation and maintenance of ground stations, and other associated services to MNOs and other third parties. Essentially meaning revenue from equipment SpaceMobile provides in order to make their satellite connectivity available and compatible with the existing ground infrastructure of MNOs. When it comes to competition, SpaceMobile is in a similar position to SoundHound AI, which was covered recently, in that the industry has high barriers to entry. In this case, the cost and difficulty associated with successfully developing, building, and launching a satellite network, and obtaining various governmental and regulatory approvals, all of which require substantial capital in addition to time. In terms of examples of competing companies, there are existing service providers such as Inmarsat, Globalstar, Orbcomm, Thuraya Telecommunications Co., and Iridium Communications that offer a range of mobile and fixed communications options. In the case of fixed broadband operators, a VSAT end-user terminal is used to provide service, while with mobile satellite service providers, a special-purpose satellite phone is required. Competition also comes from companies developing new low Earth orbit networks, such as SpaceX's Starlink, OneWeb, and Amazon's Kuiper, along with Apple, which in 2023 introduced a new service supported by Globalstar that provides SOS emergency service capabilities to its latest generation iPhones. Similarly, in September 2022, SpaceX and T-Mobile US announced that they plan to offer a text-based service from a constellation that will be built in the future. SpaceMobile service states they will mainly compete with the direct-to-device segment of the mobile satellite service sector by providing the ability to support cellular broadband data rates, utilize existing unmodified handsets, and operate in virtually all of the low to mid-band spectrums currently used by MNOs. More indirectly, there will also be competition with regional mobile satellite communication services in several geographic markets. In these cases, the majority of customers require regional, not global, mobile voice and data services, so competitors may present a viable alternative to the SpaceMobile service. These regional competitors operate or plan to operate geostationary satellites. At the end of the day, competition is good for end users who benefit from more stable connection and access to broader coverage. Now, if you would like to learn more about the launch vehicle provider aspect for satellites, please check out the video on Rocket Lab. Then please like and follow, because more videos are coming soon on equally exciting topics such as electric vehicles and the infrastructure that will support them. Thanks for watching, and bye for now.